I paid for my sister's lavish wedding, but when her in-laws had me uninvited, I quietly canceled every vendor. They found out when guests arrived to an empty, locked venue. My name is Adrian. I'm 34, and I've been the designated fixer in my family since I was old enough to understand what that word meant. You know the type. The one who quietly steps in with a checkbook when things go wrong, who smooths over fights, who always shows up even when nobody else does. I've spent years filling that role, not because I wanted praise or recognition, but because I honestly believed that's what family did. You supported each other, even when it wasn't convenient, especially then. That belief stuck with me, even after years of being the afterthought, the +1 in every family photo, squeezed in on the edge, half. Cropped out while my younger sister Emily stood dead center, flanked by mom and dad like she was the sun we all revolved around. Emily's the golden child, always has been. Ever since she was little, the family narrative orbited around her milestones, her ballet recitals, her grades, her college acceptances, her relationships. When she got engaged to Jordan, a guy from an old money family with a last name that carried weight in their social circles, it was like a coronation. Suddenly, everything became about impressing his side. My mom was over the moon. She talked about connections, about how this wedding would be a statement, about how we needed to show that our family could keep up. I mostly stayed quiet, nodding when asked, helping where I could. I didn't see the point in making waves. I was the first one Emily called when the engagement was official, not to gush, not to ask me to be in the wedding party, but because she needed help with the deposit for the venue. It's just to lock in the date, she said. Jordan's parents are covering the rest. You'll get it back. She didn't ask if I was okay with it. She knew I had the money. I always had the money. And like a fool, I wired her $8,000 that same night. Then came the catering, a last-minute change. Apparently, the initial vendor wasn't elevated enough. She called me at 10 p.m., crying, saying Jordan's mom had threatened to move the whole thing to a country club if the food didn't match their standards. I covered the difference, another $4,500. Then the photographer, then the florist, then the audio setup for the ceremony, something about string quartets needing special mics. Piece by piece, the wedding started to look more like a royal gala than anything Emily could have dreamed up on her own, and I kept paying. I didn't even question it, until I caught Mom bragging on a family group call. She was going on about how lucky Emily was, that Jordan's family was so generous, how they really came through, and how she couldn't believe what an incredible gift they were giving her daughter. I waited for someone to mention my name. They didn't. I said nothing. That silence became a pattern. I wasn't invited to the tasting, or the dress fitting, or the rehearsal dinner plans. When I asked, Mom gave me vague answers. "Oh, it's just for the immediate families," she said once. Another time, "You wouldn't enjoy these things, Adrian. It's all frilly nonsense." I told myself I didn't care. I wasn't in it for the praise. But still, it stung. Then, 2 weeks before the wedding, I got a text. Not a call, not a conversation, just a flat, clinical message from my mom. "You're not coming to the wedding. Emily's in-laws think it's best if you sit this one out. No hard feelings." I stared at my phone for a full minute before it registered. I thought it was a joke, some weird, tone-deaf way of saying I didn't need to wear a suit or something. But no. I called her, straight to voicemail. I called Emily, same. I texted both of them, nothing. 3 hours later, I got a follow-up from Mom. "Please respect their wishes. It's not personal." Not personal? I sat in the dark for a while after that, phone still in hand, thinking about every dollar I'd sent, every event I'd been excluded from, every time I'd swallowed that little voice in my head whispering that something wasn't right. I remembered the first time Emily borrowed money from me. She was 20 and late on rent. I didn't even blink. Or the time our dad needed a new water heater, and I paid for it because the check from his seasonal job hadn't come in yet. I thought about all the birthdays I spent alone because they were busy or traveling or just forgot. And I remembered the voicemail from my aunt last year, the one where she said, "You really hold this family together, you know that?" Funny, I wasn't even good enough for the background of a photo. I replied to the text, "Copy that." That's all I said. No argument, no guilt, no begging for inclusion, just quiet agreement. And then I went on my laptop. The first thing I did was call the venue. The reservation was in my name. I'd been the one to sign the contract and make the deposit. I asked them what would happen if I canceled. They were polite, if a bit confused. "You're well within the window," they said. There'd be a partial refund, but the date would be released immediately. I canceled it. Next, the caterer, same situation. They had my card on file, my signature. I asked for the cancellation terms. I got a partial refund there too. Photographer? Gone. DJ? Done. Florist? They were actually relieved. Apparently, Emily had been tweaking the arrangements every other day, and they were starting to lose patience. By the time I was finished, everything they thought was locked in had vanished. But I didn't tell them. I didn't say a word. I just let the silence stretch. A few days passed, then a week. The wedding was set for Saturday. I knew they'd find out eventually, just not from me. I figured they'd either be too distracted to notice or too arrogant to imagine that I'd actually walk away. That's the thing about being the reliable one. People assume you'll keep showing up no matter how many times they shut the door in your face. The silence was almost peaceful until the day of the wedding. That morning I went for a walk, left my phone behind. No news, no social media, just the sound of leaves crunching under my feet and the distant hum of traffic. I took my time getting back. I wanted the distance. I wanted the space between me and whatever chaos was unraveling. Because I knew that somewhere right about now, guests were arriving to a locked venue with no chairs, no food, no music, no flowers. I imagined Jordan's mother pacing, Emily crying, my mom trying to reach me, her voice tight with rage and desperation. When I finally got home, my phone was vibrating off the counter, 67 missed calls, 43 texts, 6 voicemails. The top message was from my mom. Adrian, what did you do? People are showing up, and nothing is here. The venue is locked. There's no food. No one is answering. Call me. Below that, Emily texted, this isn't funny. Fix this. Then Jordan, my parents are livid. You better hope I don't see you today. I didn't respond to any of them. I just sat down on the edge of my bed, staring at the flurry of notifications like they were written in a different language. All that urgency, all that sudden concern. Where had that energy been when I was politely being told I wasn't welcome at my own sister's wedding? The first voicemail was my mom again, panicked. She sounded like she was pacing while leaving it. Adrian, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is not okay. People flew in for this. Do you understand how bad this looks? We need you to call the venue now. The second was Emily, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. I cannot believe you would do this to me after everything I've done for you. You're ruining the most important day of my life. This is disgusting, Adrian. I almost laughed. Everything she's done for me? My thumb hovered over the next voicemail but didn't press play. I had a feeling it would be the same. Guilt, outrage, attempts to twist the situation around like I was the villain for not quietly funding the entire fantasy and then vanishing like a good little ATM. But I wasn't angry anymore. That was the strange part. For the first time in years, I felt light, calm, like a weight had finally been set down after years of carrying it around on my back. This wasn't about money, not really. It was about being treated like a human being, with boundaries, with feelings, with value beyond my bank account. I made myself a cup of coffee and took it out to the small balcony of my apartment. The sun was high, the air sharp and clear. I could hear distant traffic, the quiet bustle of a Saturday that for most people was just another day. For me, it felt like a reset. At noon, the calls started up again. The guest list must have reached the venue by then, and the full scope of the disaster had finally landed. A few people I hadn't spoken to in years messaged me, mostly cousins and extended family. Some asked what was going on, others demanded explanations. One or two even accused me of ruining Emily's life. But then came a message from my Aunt Carla, my dad's sister, one of the few people who'd always treated me with kindness. Her message just said, I heard what happened. I'm so sorry they treated you that way. If you need anything, I'm here. That was the only one I answered. By late afternoon, things were unraveling publicly. Photos started surfacing online, guests in suits and cocktail dresses standing outside a locked venue. Someone had snapped a shot of the closed for private event sign, still taped to the gate, untouched. Another had taken a video of Jordan arguing with what looked like a parking attendant. There was no food truck, no decorations, no music, just confusion and growing frustration. A friend from high school I hadn't spoken to in ages messaged me a link to a Facebook post from one of Jordan's relatives. It was a long, angry rant about entitled families, about how some people clearly can't handle hosting a real wedding, and how certain people had sabotaged a beautiful day because they couldn't stand not being the center of attention. I didn't even bother replying. Let them build whatever story they needed to feel righteous. But then, around 5:12 p.m., my phone rang again. This time I answered. It was Mom Adrian, she said, her voice thin and hoarse. We need to talk. There was no warmth in her tone, just urgency, maybe even desperation. I stayed quiet. We're at the hotel now, she continued. Emily is hysterical. Jordan's parents are furious. This is a disaster. You can't just vanish and leave us like this. Why would you do something so cruel? I exhaled slowly, gripping the phone tighter than I needed to. You said I wasn't invited, I said calmly. I respected that. That's not what I meant, she snapped. You knew this wasn't personal. It was personal to me. There was a pause, a long one. I could hear muffled voices in the background, maybe Emily shouting, maybe someone crying. Then Mom said, "You didn't have to destroy everything." "I didn't destroy anything," I replied. "I just stopped paying for it." Another silence. Then, almost in a whisper, "Adrian, they think you did this to punish her." I let that hang in the air for a moment. "No," I said. "This was me finally choosing myself." She started to respond, but I cut her off. "Mom, I didn't say anything when you left me out of everything. Not the tasting, not the rehearsal dinner, not even a seat at the wedding. I gave money, I gave time, I gave support. And in return, I got a text telling me I was an inconvenience to be removed. That wasn't me. You signed your name to it." She fell quiet again. "You don't get to decide when I matter and when I don't," I said. "You don't get to use me like a resource and then toss me out like clutter." "I'm your mother," she said softly. "And I'm your son," I replied. "Funny how that only seems to matter when I'm footing the bill." Her voice broke a little after that. "Adrian, what are we supposed to do now?" I didn't answer right away. I just stared out at the city skyline, watching the sun dip behind the buildings, the sky turning that deep gold that always made me feel both small and grounded. Finally, I said, "I don't know, Mom, but I won't be your safety net anymore." Then I hung up. I knew that was only the beginning, that there would be fallout, that Jordan's family would escalate, that Emily would scream, that Mom would spiral. I knew the story they'd tell about me, the villainous older brother who ruined the fairy tale. But for once I didn't care. I had finally drawn a line, and the real reckoning hadn't even begun. The calls didn't stop. They slowed, sure, morphed from full-on panicked ringstorms to quieter, more strategic attempts. But they didn't stop. Jordan's dad left me a voicemail the next day. Calm, cold, something about legal ramifications and breach of verbal agreement. It was funny, in a bitter kind of way. I could practically hear the golf club in his hand as he dictated it, like I was some underperforming vendor, not a human being who'd personally bankrolled the fantasy his son married into. I didn't respond. I didn't flinch either. Let them sue me for canceling things I paid for, under my name, with my card. Let them explain to a lawyer how they uninvited the man who funded the entire operation, then assumed he'd still show up, silent, invisible, and obedient, like a check that signs itself. I spent the following week off social media, off family chats, off everything. I needed air. I needed distance. I stayed local, hit the gym in the mornings, read in cafes, walked longer routes home. No one recognized me, and I liked it that way. It felt clean, like I was rinsing off years of built-up residue, shedding the identity they'd carved out for me, the bank, the background brother, the silent son. But silence has a shelf life, and on the 6th day after the wedding imploded, that silence shattered. It was evening. I had just sat down with a plate of takeout when my buzzer went off. I wasn't expecting anyone. The building has a camera at the front door, so I flicked on the screen, already half expecting a delivery person who got the wrong apartment. It was Emily, hair up in a messy bun, makeup smudged, arms crossed tightly against her chest like she was holding herself together with sheer willpower. Her phone was clutched in one hand, screen still lit, as if she'd been rereading something over and over again. I didn't move. She rang again, then a third time. Then she looked up at the camera. "Adrian," she said, her voice barely audible through the speaker. "I know you're watching." I stayed frozen. I didn't know what I felt. Not anger exactly, and not sympathy either, just a slow, churning mix of confusion, detachment, and something sharp I couldn't quite name. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "Please." After a moment, I pressed the button. The door clicked open. A few minutes later, she was standing in my hallway, arms still crossed, eyes darting around like she didn't quite recognize the space. I didn't offer her a seat. I didn't offer her water. I just leaned against the wall and waited. She didn't speak right away, just looked at me. "You really did it," she finally said, almost in awe. I said nothing. "You actually canceled everything." "Yep, you didn't even tell us." "You told me I wasn't welcome." Her mouth twitched. I couldn't tell if it was frustration or guilt. "That wasn't me. That was Mom. You didn't stop her." She opened her mouth, closed it again. "It wasn't like I could. You could have called me, you could have texted, you could have said, 'Adrian, I want you there.' But you didn't." She looked down. I thought you'd show up anyway." That stung more than I wanted to admit. Not because I had considered it, I hadn't, but because it confirmed something I'd long suspected. They didn't see me as a person with limits. Just a guarantee, the guy who shows up, pays up, shuts up. "Did you ever even plan to pay me back?" I asked, voice quieter now. She didn't answer right away. Then, "No." Simple, honest, awful. I exhaled slowly. "Then what are you doing here, Emily?" Her eyes flicked up to mine. "I don't know. I believed that." There was a long, heavy silence between us. I watched her face, saw the faint twitch in her jaw. The stress, the shame, the stubborn pride fighting not to break. She looked smaller somehow, not physically, but in presence. The girl who used to command every room we walked into, who turned heads and wielded attention like a spotlight, now standing in front of me, dimmed, not defeated but real. "Do you regret it?" I asked. She flinched. "What, the wedding?" "No, the text." Her lip quivered for just a second. "I didn't write it, Adrian, but I let it be sent. That was the closest I was going to get to an apology." I nodded once. "Okay." She finally stepped forward like she was going to say something more, but then her phone buzzed. She glanced down at it, eyes scanning whatever message came through, then looked up again. "Jordan's family thinks you're unstable," she said, almost casually. "Let them." "You're not going to defend yourself?" "No." Her brow furrowed. "Why not?" I shrugged. "Because I don't owe them anything. Not anymore. Not you, not Mom, not anyone who saw me as a wallet with legs." Emily stepped back, arms dropping slightly. "So, that's it? You're just done?" I looked at her for a long moment. "No. I'm just finally even." She didn't respond, just stood there in the middle of my apartment, looking around like she wanted to find something to hold on to. But there was nothing left for her here. Not guilt, not comfort, not even anger, just the stillness of someone who'd stopped waiting for closure and decided to make their own. Finally, I said, "You should go." She hesitated, then nodded. She turned and walked to the door. Just before she opened it, she paused and said, "I don't know how we come back from this." I didn't say anything. She left, and for the first time in my life, I let her. After Emily left, the quiet in my apartment settled like dust. I stood there for a while, staring at the closed door, half expecting her to come back, to knock again, to say something, anything, that would put a different ending on this mess. But she didn't. She walked away, and I finally understood that she wasn't the only one that night I made a decision. I wasn't going to be part of this family the way they wanted anymore. I wasn't going to be the silent supporter, the invisible backbone, the human wallet they called only when their world started tilting. I wasn't going to sit around waiting for a half-hearted apology that wouldn't come. I needed to end this properly, not in anger, not in bitterness, just in truth. The next morning, I got up early, sat down with a mug of coffee, opened my laptop and drafted a message. Not for Emily, not for Mom, not even for Jordan's puffed-up family. It was for the whole extended family, every cousin, every aunt, every uncle, even a few second cousins, who only saw my name pop up at weddings and funerals. The subject line was simple, a few things you should know, and in the email I laid it all out. I explained, without venom, exactly what had happened, how I'd funded most of the wedding, $22,000 in total between deposits, vendor fees, upgrades, because I was asked for help, how I was later uninvited by my own family in favor of optics, how I canceled the services that were under my name and legally my responsibility because I had been explicitly told I was not wanted. I made it clear there was no sabotage, no drunken tantrum, no petty revenge, just a simple final withdrawal of support. I attached receipts, invoices, screenshots, not to brag, not to humiliate, just to show the undeniable reality. I wasn't about to let Jordan's parents spin some sob story about a jealous brother, without the full truth standing right there for anyone willing to see it. I ended the email with this: "I don't expect anyone to pick sides. I just want you to know mine. Clearly, calmly, and without the years of rewriting and gaslighting that have too often followed situations like this. I wish Emily and Jordan well. I hope they find the happiness they deserve. I simply will not be a part of it anymore." Then I hit send and shut my laptop. I didn't wait for responses. I didn't care who gossiped, who fumed, who shrugged and went back to their brunch. I wasn't doing this for applause. I was doing it because, for once, I needed to be on my side, not theirs. The fallout was immediate. By noon, my phone lit up again, not with hate, surprisingly, but with messages from a few cousins I barely knew that. Quiet, private messages. I had no idea, man. "I'm sorry. If you ever want to grab a drink, let me know. I'm Team Adrian. We all kind of knew they treated you badly. None of us said anything. That's on us." I didn't respond to most of them. I appreciated it, truly, but this wasn't about validation. It wasn't about burning it all down for a cheering crowd. It was about walking away from a life where I was expected to swallow everything and pretend it tasted fine. Of course, Mom eventually responded too. A long, rambling email full of justifications and half-hearted non-apologies. We didn't mean for it to escalate. We were under a lot of pressure from Jordan's family. "You should have communicated better. Family is about forgiveness." She even tried the emotional card. "You know your father would have been heartbroken to see us like this." I didn't even finish reading it. I archived it and blocked her number. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt anymore. I just didn't have anything left to give her. The final blow came about a week later, though I didn't know it until my Aunt Carla called me, laughing so hard she could barely get the words out. Apparently, Jordan's family, so obsessed with status and appearances, hadn't taken kindly to the wedding fiasco being exposed publicly. Not because I had leaked anything, but because one of the guests, some distant cousin of Jordan's, had posted about it on Facebook in graphic, humiliating detail. A local gossip blog picked it up, and then a regional news outlet, wedding disaster, $100,000 celebration ends in empty venue and angry guests. Jordan's family was mortified, furious. Their carefully curated image took a hit. There were talks about legal options, but nothing ever came of it because, again, all the contracts were tied to me, and I had been legally in the clear. Jordan apparently started pulling away from Emily almost immediately afterward. Whispered accusations, tension, resentment. The cracks widened until 6 months later they filed for divorce. I didn't celebrate it. Divorce is ugly, it's painful, even when the people involved are selfish and shallow. But in the privacy of my own mind, I acknowledged a truth I couldn't ignore. They had built their marriage on sand, on lies, on entitlement, and when the tide finally came in, they were shocked to find no foundation underneath them. As for me, I moved on. I switched jobs, left the city I grew up in for one where nobody knew me as Emily's brother or the one who always helped. I built a new life, smaller, quieter, but infinitely more mine. I stopped showing up just because I was expected to. I stopped answering calls that only came when someone needed something. I stopped making excuses for people who wouldn't do the same for me. And I started living, really living. I traveled, took up photography, made friends who knew me not for what I could give, but for who I was. Sometimes, late at night, I'd think about them, my old family, and wonder if they ever truly understood why I left, if they sat around holiday tables with a conspicuous empty chair and whispered about how I changed, about how cold I'd become. Maybe they did. But more likely, they just replaced me with silence. Families like that are experts at rewriting history. Either way, it didn't matter. I wasn't their ghost to summon anymore. I was free, and this time, it wasn't because they allowed it. It was because I took it. And I never looked back.